Hey everyone, this is Mason, and you're listening to the HerbRally Podcast. Today's episode is a little snippet of an interview I did with Heather Sanderson, and Heather is the host of the Majestic Wisdom Podcast. This is really just the first 5 or so minutes of our conversation. I wanted to do a little preview of it here so you would go and listen to it on her podcast, which if you just search in your podcast player, Majestic Wisdom Podcast should pop right up. She's been doing this podcast for over a year now, I believe, and it's great. So I just want to recommend you go and subscribe to her podcast, and there you'll also be able to finish the interview that we did as well. If you'd like to see a video of the interview, you could go to HerbRally's YouTube channel, and that's just youtube.com/c/HerbRally, or just search for HerbRally in the search bar. It'll pop right up. It's the second to newest episode as of now. I'll include a link to that in the show notes. I'll also include a link to Majestic Wisdom Publishing, which is Heather's publishing company, and I'll include a link to her podcast as well as to her newsletter. She's got a great newsletter. She's a great storyteller, so I recommend signing up for her newsletter, subscribing to her podcast, and a big thanks to Heather for hosting me on my first ever podcast. So if you enjoyed this 5 minutes or so, be sure to finish the episode on hers. Also, real quickly, before we get into the show, we're exactly a week away from the opening of HerbRally's Schoolhouse, and that's our membership site. Basically, it's going to be $10 a month to receive exclusive content, kind of like the Netflix of herbs, if you will, or herbalism. There's going to be lots of teachers, lots of classes. That said, we're starting with one class. That's a class by Missy Rose on Hawthorne. It's about 30 minutes full of Hawthorne information. And each week, we're just going to keep adding on to it. Every week, we just keep adding a new class, new content, whether that's video, written, or audio. Most of them will just be video classes with accompanying audio as well. If you want more information on that, herbrally.com/schoolhouse. And I think that's it for today. I wanted to keep it somewhat short. Without further ado, enjoy these 5+ minutes of my interview with Heather Sanderson on the Majestic Wisdom Podcast. All right, talk to you later.
All right, welcome to everyone who's listening. My name's Heather Sanderson, and this is a Majestic Wisdom Podcast. And I'm here today with Mason Hutchison. So welcome, Mason. So
Thank
happy
you.
You can be here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for pronouncing my last name correctly.
Yes, I was worried about that. Cool.
Yeah.
And Mason and I, so we've only really met over email so far. So this is our first face-to-face virtual interaction, which is very exciting. And I was reading your bio and trying to figure out the words to introduce you properly. And you've done so many interesting things, and we're going to touch on a couple of them today. So I'm excited to hear more about HerbRally and the art of frugal nutrition. But to me, by way of introduction, you're a plant person.
Yeah.
Is that resonates?
Yeah, it really does. It's been a long journey, but I would say at this point, I like plant person more than herbalist. So for me specifically, I have a hard time saying I'm an herbalist, but like you ask my brother, he'll say, Mason, you're an herbalist, but plant person, we'll go with that.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that distinction actually, because an herbalist kind of, to me, is limiting you to one thing. And there's this connection, it feels like you have with the plants that I'd like to hear more about that is beyond that. So where did this start for you? Did you always know you were a plant person, or is it something that came to you later in life?
Yeah. My brother, again, he has recently brought up this fact of when we were little kids. He's 3 years older than me. He vividly remembers me talking to plants, which I have no recollection of. So that's kind of cool, looking back in hindsight. A lot you could kind of follow the breadcrumbs and see how it all came together. But I would say my introduction into becoming a plant person kind of came from nutrition. So it seemed to me as if herbalism was a natural offshoot of nutrition. So I kind of just fell into it. I really enjoyed, fitness and lifting weights and the nutrition surrounding that culture. And then slowly but surely, from like 18 to 19, I became more and more of a hippie. And so I just, I feel as if slowly but surely I became more and more of a, like I said, a hippie, and naturally that just led to, herbs. And I really enjoyed adaptogens. As you know, as part of my story, if you read my bio, I used to work for Mountain Rose Herbs for 11 years. And so I associated plants as just dried herbs. I loved Hoshu Wu and, Eleuthero and ginseng and all these Chinese herbs. And I associated them as just dried herbs. And then I decided to just kind of go all in, and I took this course called the Columbine School of Botanical Studies. And that's really in Eugene, Oregon. And that's really when I became full-blown plant person, because then I saw that these plants were more than just dried herbs to consume.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that your older brother's there also tapping on your shoulder, it sounds like, and being like, you used to do this. I remember. I'm glad you found your way back to what it sounds like was natural in childhood, and found all these different trainings and ways to weave it in through your work as well. And I imagine, but I don't know, so I'm going to ask, is that what set the foundation for HerbRally? And can you talk a bit about what that is and how it started?
Yeah, so HerbRally started essentially as a website that I wanted to see exist in the world, which it started out as a herbalism events website. So as I mentioned, I worked for Mountain Rose Herbs. I was their event coordinator. And so I was like, oh, that'd be cool if there was a website that just tells you what herbalism events are happening around the country. And what I found was there were some doing it here and there, but mostly we're just listing major herb conferences. What I wanted to know about were herbalism events, plant walks, just little lectures happening in these smaller communities. And I couldn't find anything like that. And I basically just decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I bought the domain herbrally.com. And then I held on to it probably for like a year. And I just kind of sat with it. I had this idea in my head that it had to be perfect when I launched. And then one day I was just like, no, I have to do this. So I just bought a Squarespace website and I just started listing events, Wow. So it really just started out as an events board.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the HerbRally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at HerbRally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from HerbRally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.